Welcome to Attachment Matters, a series of conversations between two moms who love to nerd out on the subject of attachment. We'll dive into what it is, what it isn't, what it relates to, what it can mean for parenting, and how it can help us explain the current state of things.
As mothers, both of us found ourselves entangled in the world of gender ideology, following very different routes to get here. What we share in common is how the attachment framework has helped us to untangle these threads and better understand and fulfill our responsibilities as mothers in both the beauty and the challenge of these times.
In this episode, we finish answering our first round of community member questions, highlighting the crucial component of play to soften the defenses of both ourselves and our trans-identified children, including those who have neural differences or no longer reside in the home. We also plant seeds for future conversations around the cultural obstacles and other complicating dynamics that make prioritizing relationship in today's world so incredibly challenging, yet more important than ever. Well, Rose, it's been a minute.
I know, feels like a long time.
I know, it really does. So we had some scheduling challenges, but we have returned to finish answering these questions that were submitted by the SMP online community. Amazing questions. And we're about halfway through them. We think we're going to be able to get through the rest of them today. They cluster well, and so we're looking forward to answering those. We did want to address the scheduling challenges that will likely continue through the summer. So
Yeah.
just so listeners know, yeah, we'll probably back off to about one episode a month through the summer. That's our aim. Just because it's going to be difficult to get these recorded and produced and published on the schedule we had, which was every 2 weeks. We're going to go to once a month, and hopefully that's going to work out okay.
Yep. We're not going away. We're just needing to shuffle competing priorities for the summer. And at least on my end, prioritize my son's being home from school
Mm-hmm.
and not only balancing my job,
Yes.
but also finding lots of time for play, I hope.
Yes. 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 Part of that resourcing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big, big, big priority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so again, yeah, these questions come from our community. We were about halfway through them last time. And it's just been so rewarding for me to get the feedback from the
Yeah,
community members and to witness the discussions that are happening in there. It's such uh, a rich conversation going on,
that's
in there.
wonderful. Oh, that's so wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it's amazing. And people trying things out and sharing what's working and deepening the conversation, right? Having more questions, having a place to be able to converse about these topics, I think has been a resource. It's supportive and again, just so rewarding to see it making a difference. I wanted to make sure you know that it is
Oh,
impacting.
I'm
It is
so
impacting your
happy to
community.
hear that. And, I know I feel like you commented this to me just as in an email, and I'll say for myself as well. I mean, I think us having these conversations is helping me.
Yeah, me too. Oh yeah.
It's helping me grow not only in being able to share and articulate these concepts and share, new pieces of my own story and experience, but keeping the material fresh
Mm-hmm.
is bringing me just, renewed insight and ongoing insight in how I am showing up for my own children
Mm-hmm.
on the day to day. And I need it. I need it just
Mm-hmm.
like everybody else does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's been invaluable for me too to revisit, reinforce these ideas and incorporate them into what I offer the community and my clients and yes, my children. And
Yeah.
and noticing, like paying attention to things and the interactions with my own children and thinking, oh, that's what that is, and that's what that is.
Yes,
Yeah, it's again just such a rich resource,
it is.
it that raises consciousness, honestly, because it gives you more awareness of the mechanisms at play, I
Yep.
think, and when you can recognize them, that can be so, so helpful. Helps us snap us out of our rumination, and recognize what's happening and gives us a way to, I think, respond to situations that can be more productive. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Otherwise, I
wonderful.
would not be here.
Yeah.
If this were, if
Right.
this, yeah, if this material hadn't profoundly shaped
Mm,
my own life as a mother, I mean, as a
yeah.
daughter, as a person embedded in relationships,
Hmm.
I would not be here so passionate to share it with others.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
Shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Where do you want to start?
Well, why don't I read sort of the next question that we had kind of in the line of questions that we hadn't addressed yet. And I am going to read the first part of this question. This is a question with two parts. So the question reads, when we become aware that our child has not attained all six levels of attachment, how can we support the development of these deeper attachments in our child when something in their current life or past development impedes it? Specifically, one, when the child is a legal adult and lives away from home most of the year at college, etc. And two, when the child is a teen or adult with a developmental condition, for example, ADHD, autism, or developmental trauma that impedes the normal formation of attachments. So this is such a great question, and it has, as we see, multiple parts. So
Yes.
which
And
one
can
of
I
these?
just say too,
Yeah, yeah.
these are common um, scenarios
Oh, yeah.
among, the moms that follow the Stoic Mom Project. So this is
Okay,
this is a rich question that is going to help lots of people, I think, to get answers.
that's
Um,
great.
yeah. So you
That's
were
great.
asking, where should we start? Where do you think we should start with this one?
Well, I think um, I'm just rereading it here. So the first part is how do we support the development of deeper attachment with our child? We want our child to grow those deeper roots. And specifically, I'm going to kind of this is an assumption, but I'm just going to speak to it here. We would like to cultivate them having a deeper attachment to us as their parents
Hmm.
and potentially other hopefully, somewhat mature adults in their lives, right? So not just those horizontal, those peer attachments, but how do we cultivate um, their connection, their relationship to us? Um, that's, I guess, where I would take it.
Okay.
And how do we do that when that child is actually no longer living with us and
Hmm.
they're over 18
Hmm.
and we have a physical separation if they're at college, and they certainly have the ability to make their own choices
Hmm.
um, as an adult. So that seems like the first part of that question to start with, and then after that we can go into that second part around ADHD and autism.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna extend this a little bit after we address it initially,
Okay.
how to deepen attachment with an adult that lives away from home.
Mm. Well, I bet you have some examples. You should just
Um,
dive in. Dive in.
it's tricky.
Yeah.
And I guess I will go ahead and
Yeah.
extend it now and
Yeah.
just
Please.
there are some situations where the young adult child has requested space,
Yeah.
has been very specific in sort of, I've even heard territory, right? Like marking their territory and asking mom to
Mm,
stay away.
wow.
Hmm. Hmm. I have an adult daughter who lives in another state, right? So it takes
Yeah.
us a day to get to her by car. Um, I think ours is a unique situation in that she lives pretty independently.
Yeah.
She's not reliant on us
Hmm.
financially.
Mm,
And so I think that that is rather unique. It seems like most of the moms that I've worked with that have young adult children are still heavily involved in financially supporting them. So that
hmm.
definitely creates a little bit of a different dynamic, I
Mm,
think.
hmm.
Luckily, I think we share a sense of humor. And
Yeah.
so,
Yes.
it's play. I would say
Yes.
play actually
Oh.
is a big part of staying connected to my daughter. And also, and I think this can be the trickiest part, I don't weigh in without consent for the most part. If she's got something
Mm,
going on in her life,
mm.
I don't feel compelled to direct her in that,
Yeah.
which I think too is maybe unique. Took a
Yeah.
lot of practice. But I think too, my mom modeled that for me.
Yeah.
I think it probably came a little easier to me just because my mom parented her adult children that way.
Yeah.
And so I had a model for that.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have a tendency to to the counter will doesn't get triggered
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
her. And so I
Hmm.
think that's helpful. That's a concept we haven't really touched on, have we?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
My most of my community members know that one. We use that a lot. My clients have heard me use that term a lot too.
Yeah.
And maybe just real quickly, that is an instinct that humans have to resist perceived control. And so,
That's right. That's
um,
right.
okay. And it's going to be dependent on the dynamic and that engagement and how
Yeah.
maybe the alpha is interacting right with the child.
Yeah.
Um, or the other. Anyway, so another thing with my daughter though is we don't talk that often.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because when we get on the phone, we're on the phone for a long time,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
so we both have to be mindful of that. I think she knows it's going to be a time investment when she jumps on the
Yeah.
phone with me.
Yeah.
And so we text a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I love what you've said so far. And I want to add one little piece to the counter will description, and then
Hmm.
I want to talk more about play.
Hmm.
Um, so a way that helps me to understand or define counter will for me is when the the felt sense of coercion
Hmm.
is greater than the felt sense of attachment.
Mm.
So what attachment does
Hmm.
for a child, but also for anyone of any age, we go back to this idea of attachment being hierarchical, and the seeker who's seeking connection or relationship to the provider, that alpha provider, when when that seeker has given their heart, or when that seeker is being driven to be close to their part of that instinct, that attachment instinct, is to be good for.
Mm. Hmm.
Now, when the sense of coercion is greater than that instinct to be good for,
Hmm.
you're going to be bad for. You're going to do the opposite. Your will kicks in and says, I am going to do the exact opposite of what you're telling me to do.
Okay, that's a really important piece right there that I needed reminded of
Hmm.
because I remember something about that
Yeah,
it had to do with being in right attachment.
exactly.
Um,
You're going to be good for those who you are attached to.
right.
I
Regardless
can
of
love.
whether coercion is involved. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. I just also wanted to reiterate and just say it again because I think that this part is so hard for people to wrap their heads around that this is an instinct. We
Yes,
often think that kids are misbehaving on
correct.
purpose, right? Or with
Oof,
intention, but
yes,
they cannot help themselves. That this
correct.
is an unconscious mechanism that is going
Yes.
to drive them to essentially show up for the provider, I guess, to get the opposite of what they're seeking
Hmm.
from the child. That's what counterwill results in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That is such a beautiful thing. And it goes back to some of what we talked about. And I know this is a fresh topic for some members of your community, this gardener versus sculptor.
Mhm.
That sculptor mentality is I must chisel my child's behavior. Um, the gardener approach is with those conditions. Well, the conditions are cultivating this deeper attachment that this question is asking about. How do I get my child to, um, feel valued by me, have that sense of value and significance? How do I get my child to give me their heart, to have that feel that sense of emotional bond with me that might facilitate that deeper psychological sharing? That's the gardener approach. We're cultivating that sense of attachment, which will automatically make our child want to be good for us. We don't have to chisel good behavior. And quite the opposite is what oftentimes results when we take that sculpting approach. If we don't have a child who's given us their hearts, the sculpting action is going to make them reject us more, is going to make them do that. That counter will is just going to lock in, and it's will not be there. It's not willful, like you're saying. It's
Mhm.
not conscious. It is instinctual, and it is an attachment based instinct.
Yeah, I have so much to say. Um, in response to that, first off, how beautiful is that?
I know. It's just you just sit in awe. Once you it
Hmm.
when it clicks for me, it's like I am in awe of the design.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, just the social implications
So many.
of that kind of blow me away, and I
Yeah,
that could take us down a pretty deep rabbit hole. But I'll just plant that seed, and maybe people can ponder on that on
yeah.
their own. Um, but what I'm hearing as far as again how to deepen the attachment is to find a place, especially if it's not already there for you, where you can enjoy your adult children.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you for saying that. So we kind of went off on the counterwheel tangent, but I want to just kind of seal that up with saying what I feel like you're saying is let's move into the realm of play
Hmm.
versus our interactions being about telling them what to do all the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Maybe we lay off the behavior focus. And I'm going to come back to this probably 100 times in this episode, but Neufeld has a mantra or I don't know, like a message for this: retreat into relationship.
Hmm.
Stop
Hmm.
focusing on behavior. And this is for any age, but oh boy, you better believe it's especially for adolescents and above. Retreating into relationship. How do I cultivate the relationship to my child? And you are 100% spot on in saying one of the best ways to do that is through play.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and wow, is there so much to be said around that play. But I love as you were talking initially about how you and your daughter stay connected through a sense of humor, we have to see ourselves as retreating back into that, with the adult child, more of a consultant role that they come to consult with, that they are initiating that consultation. And the likelihood of them doing that is going to be so much greater if they feel like they have a relationship to us, that they can
Hmm.
trust us, that we aren't coercing them, trying to coerce them all the time. And I do think play is an inroad to just helping that attachment to flourish.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think even on this side of coercion, we've got to be mindful of our judgment.
Yeah.
If they feel like the way that they are doing life is constantly being assessed and judged, and they're not doing it right,
Yeah.
again, there's not going to be a drive to
No,
share with you.
no,
You know, and
no.
and I think this is kind of the trap that happens for a lot of parents who are still very heavily financially involved is a
Ooh, leverage.
tendency, yes, leverage, and also those connection points tend to be more about accountability. I think that's how it feels to the child. Like, are you doing this? You know what I mean? It's that sort of sense of they have to,
Measure up.
and yes, hit the check boxes, right? And yes, measure up.
So an
Yes.
experiment would be if you are
Mhm.
one of the parents listening to this where you're like maybe getting a little defensive or maybe, feeling like, oh shoot, is this part of the way that I've really influenced this dynamic? I'm inadvertently creating this dynamic and I want to break out of it. An experiment would be, especially if we're talking about an adult child who's coming back home for the summer, which one of the questions later on is specifically about, or even just for the next period of months, try backing off of the accountability approach, the measuring up approach, and hone in on your interactions, whether it's text messages or you're in person. Find something that your child is into or they enjoy
Hmm.
that you could come alongside with
Hmm.
and play with. So I'm just thinking of some examples. Um, the New York Times subscription to games like Wordle, are any of your kids into those games? And you can
Hmm.
get a little family text chain going
Hmm.
where you share
Hmm.
your results with each other. You
That's
know,
actually, I've had a few moms who use Wordle.
yes.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
interesting. Hmm.
yeah. And in my family, one of the ways we cultivate that connection is um, through like sports. And I spent 20 years of my life not being into sports because I thought it was like terrible and capitalist and all these different things that I had all this, rigid ideology
Hmm.
around. Um, but after coming out of that, you know, I know it has its own like religious type aspect. Well, it's a way to stay connected. It's a way to be playful,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know, talking about the teams or doing the March Madness brackets together, or because that's what my brothers are into, and
Yes.
that's what my sons are now can
Mm.
attach through
Hmm.
being playful around those things together.
Hmm.
Um, even though we don't live close by, it's a way that we're physically separated, but we can stay connected to one another. Um, so just finding those inroads where relationship becomes your first priority, not behavior, and finding
Yeah.
some ways to laugh, some ways to be silly, a joke that's an inside joke to just the two of you or to your family that can be played out over text message. Um, those are those touches of significance, that we
Mm.
call them silly, but they're a way to stay in touch. They come back to those roots of attachment. You show that you are paying attention to what your child is into or
Hmm.
finds interesting or funny. And it provides this lightening up that can soften the heart. And if their hearts are defended against you, they need that softening to let some of those walls down.
I think I'm realizing too that with play, there's sort of that communication that the attachment is more important. That
Yes,
that's just
it's going to be
automatically communicated in that.
right.
Well, just so that if play is more or takes a higher
Yes,
priority than accountability,
right.
that's the communication in that. That's what gets telegraphed. Mhm.
That's exactly right. Because it's
Mhm.
not explicit, like I am going to play with you because you are important to me and our relationship is top. We're not being the literal,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
sometimes I want to be that way. It's very challenging for my brain to
Mhm.
be playful sometimes because I'm such a sometimes rigid and literal person, but wow, does it feel good? And it is telegraphed. It's not the explicit thing that's said out loud, but it is embodied. It's embodied by we have this connection that's just in the background. It's just there because we can be playful together, because we share this thing in common.
Mhm.
And it's an
Mhm.
inroad to that deepening of attachment that this question is asking about. And it directly connects to the second part of the question, but I know you have something to say, and then we can go maybe move into that second part.
Well, just something else that I think that it telegraphs is I trust you
Yeah,
also. You don't need me
yeah,
to be directing your life. We can enjoy each other. And I trust, well, it's also, I think that invitation. I trust that you'll come to me if you need me.
yep,
And I think that also gets telegraphed. And I think that's in the interest of interpersonal expectancy effect, or
yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecies, sending that message of you got this. You don't have to say that out loud. Let it get telegraphed, I think, in that interaction again. So,
You've got this, and I've got,
mm, yes.
and we're good.
And we're good. Yes.
We're good because I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
So that
I'm,
when you need some help to get this,
yep.
I'm
And the
here.
way they know you're here is because you're playing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
because you're saying, hey, honey, I'm here for you. You can
Mm-hmm.
say that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a it's an indirect way in to a guarded heart to say, I am warm, I am caring, I have a twinkle in my eye with you.
Mm-hmm.
I like you. And we can share this and laugh together. We can compete together in a fun way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We have something
Mm-hmm.
in common. It goes back to those roots, the twinkle in the eye that is transmitted through playfulness, gets to that first level of the senses. We have
Mm-hmm.
something in common, gets to that second level of sameness, doing something playful that you know your child is into or enjoys, gets to that third level of loyalty and belonging because you're coming alongside them.
Mm-hmm.
And even just dedicating time
Mm-hmm.
that this is important to you gets to that fourth level of significance. And as you engage in this as a routine, as a ritual in your relationship, it can open up that fifth level of the heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because as you laughter and silliness, like it softens us to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like any of you out there who has a spouse, a husband or a wife, what is it like when you're playful with your spouse? You probably like feel more of a spark in your relationship, and that maybe more of a like, entering into that more when a relationship is sexualized, but it's like, think about it, that spark is there too, um, in our relationships with our children and our families. When we play together, we feel that love.
somewhere I remember hearing it the first time in a um it was a set of conversations. It was on the Witness podcast that's done by
Mm,
Partners for Ethical Care.
hmm hmm
And it
hmm
was a father sharing conversations with his daughter. And he mentioned this. He said, laughing juries don't convict. And that entered my mind every time my family was laughing together.
Yeah,
I found my family laughing together to be so comforting. That's when I could
yeah,
say, we're going to be okay. We're
yep,
okay.
yes,
Hmm.
yes,
What is it?
yeah.
One of those trite sayings, the family that plays together. Maybe it's prays
Stays
together,
together. Oh,
but I
yeah.
think, yes, in my mind, it's the family that plays together stays together.
Yeah,
So, mhm,
100%. Yeah, play has been, I mean, we could just do so much more conversation on
mhm,
play, but
mhm,
and think about, and I just want to give this is an example from my own family. So, and this I kind of stole from Gordon Neufeld a little bit, or at least heard about it from him as well after. I can't remember what order it was, but as you are intentional about retreating into relationship and you're using the information from these attachment stages to inform your approach to playing with maybe even or especially your adult child. You're going to start to create experiences, you're going to start to create memories that you can draw upon to
mhm,
further that attachment.
mhm, mhm,
Though, and what I'm thinking about is since my family has been reunited and healing, you know, when we now will go visit my side of the family for Christmas. And what I've had my sons do the past 2 or 3 years is they actually make ornaments for each of their aunts and uncles and cousins. Now they don't have a lot of cousins. I grew up, I've got like over 100 cousins on one side of my family, but we have like
mhm,
four. So this is doable. But
mhm,
they'll make an ornament, whatever, whether it's clay or painting or watercolor, whatever it is something they did with that aunt, uncle, or cousin or grandparent that past year.
mhm,
So then you're just really feeding it. You're just
mhm,
feeding those roots.
mhm,
Because not
mhm,
only did we do go fishing, or they taught their younger cousin to play wiffle ball, or you know, we played cards together. Or I know if they don't have that close of a relationship, I know you like horses. I may not have done it with you, but I know you like it.
mhm,
Um, it's like a direct shot of significance.
mhm, mhm,
I like this. Oh, I remember doing this together.
mhm, mhm,
And this ornament's going to hang on this tree.
mhm,
So
mhm,
this is just that intentional, almost this phrase can also be used in a lot of different contexts around this work of attachment, but um, you're getting in front of it.
mhm,
You're offering that significance, you're offering that care, that attention, and that playfulness gets to be
mhm,
revisited then as you build it
mhm,
in to these rituals of your life.
mhm, mhm,
Another technique that I used with my younger sons for a period of time, and this, I was going to save this for the last question, but I realized at a certain point with my son when he was like 4 or 5 years old, um, you know, that because of his hypersensitivity or high sensitivity, it was much, and this kind of blends into this next question. How do you do this with a child who um, may have more defenses up around attachment? So whether
yeah,
it's ADHD, autism, highly sensitive, or the construct that Neufeld uses is hypersensitivity. What I noticed, and we'll come back to that question in just a second, but what I noticed with my son around 5 years of age is I knew about these developmental stages of attachment. I was like, okay, 5 years old, he should be giving me his heart. Why is he
mhm,
not? And I would just say, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'd say it over and over again. It would never land.
Mm.
Um, it didn't, and I realized that finally it clicked for me. Like, I'm saying this, it's not getting through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I took it into play. And I think I mentioned at a prior episode that I created this like my alter ego. I've had many because we use play so much in our family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
delight
Mm-hmm.
in play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I created an alter ego. But what I also did of a mother koala, feeding
Mm-hmm.
her children very weird foods, and it made him laugh and it helped soften his heart.
Mm.
But the other thing that I did was for almost like 6 months straight, my partner and I, one of the two of us every morning would leave a love note. It would be waiting for our sons on the kitchen table for breakfast. And sometimes they were super silly, knock knock jokes, you know, other times they were more heartfelt or serious, like, you are my little, whatever nicknames we would have for them. And we draw pictures. I would bring a lot of my goofy stuff into it, just to make them laugh. But it's this idea of getting in front of it. And I think you
Mm-hmm.
could do that with an adult child home for summer break.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You leave a note on the table,
Mm-hmm.
and if
I
you've
still
developed,
do that. Yes. With.
yes, if you've
Mm-hmm.
developed this
Mm-hmm.
cultivation, this play, or these things you have in common, whatever the genre of the play, you can put that in a note. You can leave it
Mm-hmm.
for them in the morning. You know, it's just another inroad and another offering of significance, offering that you are thinking of them, you're prioritizing them. You took the time to write a note. Um, just another idea
Oh,
that we've
and if they're
used.
far away, even a letter,
Oh
in,
yeah,
in the mail, I
letters.
think. Mm-hmm. Letters, a coffee card, you know,
Yep.
a little gift. It's interesting. I drew pictures too for my daughter when I had to go back to work, when she was little
Yeah. Yep.
and I didn't see her in the morning. I would make sure to draw her a picture and leave her a little note every morning.
Yep.
Um, I did just want to, I feel like I need to say this, even if we can't get too deep into it,
Hmm.
but I want
Hmm.
to acknowledge a couple of complicating factors here.
Hmm.
One, as far as sort of the accountability and the financial entanglement maybe with a young adult child is this sort of extended childhood and how that seems to be part of the culture right now where parents
Hmm.
still feel
Hmm.
like they need to parent,
Yeah.
somebody who is even in their early 20s sometimes,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
and how challenging that dynamic can be. But then also when it comes to that twinkle in your eye
Mm.
and making sure your child feels like they're adored by you,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
how hard that can be if you are watching your child medicalized.
Yeah. Oh, I can't even imagine. I've thought about this. I just want
Yeah.
you and everyone listening, as I think about our podcast and these
Hmm.
conversations, that scenario is like as I'm driving my kids to school, that is running
Hmm.
through my mind.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't have any perfect answers, but without having gone through that myself, the thing that I think about and go back to is that it's not only okay, but maybe would be very important to go back to those old pictures, the exact things that they say you should never do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Remember that that's still your child.
Mm-hmm.
And it will break your heart,
Mm-hmm.
tear your heart in two,
Mm-hmm.
to not be able to see that and this gets to the impact of this gender ideology, the medicalization, all of the tragedy of this scandal and what it does to parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Miriam Grossman is one of the people who's spoken to this the
Mm-hmm.
most in her
Mm-hmm.
interviews, the trauma that parents experience. If we think about that at an attachment level of the senses
Mm-hmm.
and what it does to a parent to no longer be able to see or hear
Mm-hmm.
their child as they have their entire lives, that the trauma of that can't be understated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet we have to find a way.
If your goal is to deepen the attachment.
Right. Is to give that generous invitation, to be that
Mm-hmm.
alpha, that fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, you know, vis-a-vis your child.
And I
To
have had moms say, they're able to do that. They're able to look
mhm,
into their
mhm,
child's eyes and
mhm.
conjure,
Yeah, the
you know,
fantasy.
and who their child is,
Right.
was, is.
Still is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, it's painful. It's painful and frankly understandable if it's
Oh,
too painful.
yeah.
It's understandable. And if your goal is to deepen the attachment and be the mom they need you to be, this is
Hmm.
what's going to be required.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a monumental task.
It is.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. And even with the twinkle in the eye, obviously if you're in person, you know, it's and if that is something that they're going to see, that they're going to be able to see. If they're away at college and you're engaging in these kind of text-based playful connections, it is something that you're conjuring through just the
Mm-hmm.
energy of your interactions with them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going
Mm-hmm.
to give you some more time for your true grief and pain,
Mm-hmm.
that you will be able to wear that, more openly if they're not physically with you to see you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you're reaching out to them, it's like you're saying, it's like finding it in you to transmit that twinkle in your energy, in your interactions with them from a distance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I will say, I know for me, and again, I'm not in this scenario, but kind of taking myself there and grappling with the emotions that I would experience should that happen and getting clear on my own um, vision of who I want to be for my child. I just knew that I wanted to be as solid as I could be for
Hmm.
her if she
Hmm.
chose that pathway and then needed to backtrack.
Hmm.
That who else
Hmm.
is she going to have?
Exactly. Right. Right.
And so that it just gave me an anchor, I guess,
Hmm.
something to and a guiding principle. Like this is why
Hmm.
I'm going to do this. This is
Yes.
why this is how I'm going to show up if this happens, is because she's going to need me down the road.
Yeah. 100%.
Oh,
100%. Yep. Yep.
okay. And that's part of that. What parenting demands of us, the
Yeah.
sacrifice. Yeah.
Exactly. 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 And why that retreating into relationship is so key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, so, so key. So let's
Okay.
tackle the second part of this
Yes.
question. And I'm actually going to be kind of brief here, at least initially. We'll see where this goes. But I think we've actually answered this in the sense that, and I'm going to read this again.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deepen those stages of attachment when the child is a teen or adult with a developmental condition, ADHD, autism, or developmental trauma that impedes the normal formation of attachments? So I know from our conversations offline that
Mm-hmm.
the topic of ADHD, autism, and for me, coming from that Neufeld model, his construct for making sense of these conditions is called hypersensitivity. We want to return to that in detail, but I think for today, the piece that I want to just really speak to, that drop of this ocean, is that the mom who wrote this is totally on point to identify that this is a situation for a child and or young adult that is going to impact their ability to develop those deeper stages of attachment. That is absolutely true. And part part of what I've talked about this Neufeld's constructs of attachment being, we talked about the plant having the deep roots and the 6 stages. Then at another episode, I talked about Neufeld's conceptualization of attachment as that womb for individuation.
Mm-hmm.
So to help respond to this question, I'm going to give another visual, or maybe you can tell me, is it an analogy or a metaphor? I don't know the difference. I know they're different,
I
but
use them interchangeably.
okay, okay.
So,
So this scene attachment is a hammock,
mm-hmm.
and that what it does for a child or for even us and in our adulthood is it provides this kind of like warmth and this place where we can rest. We know we're being held. And when we have a child, for whatever reason, because there can be different causes of sort of these clusters of symptoms that we have now diagnosed as ADHD or autism spectrum. Without getting into the weeds on that, what a child who is hypersensitive, who has what Neufeld's construct is this sensory gating system is more open. There's not as many filters in like a neurotypical, what would be called a neurotypical brain. What happens in that scenario is that hammock has holes.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone who would not have hypersensitivity, they can feel that the being held, because the dance of attachment that takes us to those deeper levels is a complex, dynamic, changeable. We've got eye contact, we've got voice, we've got emotion, we've got all of these different, multiple, complex interplays going on to weave the fabric of that hammock. And for our children who are on that, have that hypersensitivity with that open sensory gating system, that is, I don't want to say impossible, but it is so much more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that sense of being held, that fabric is solid, is just going to be so much harder to attain. And
And
go ahead.
provide, is that what you
Oh
attain
yes,
for the child, provide by the
to
parent?
receive
Uh-huh.
on the child's end and
Mm-hmm.
feel,
Okay.
and oh for sure for that parent,
Mm-hmm.
what a challenge to
Mm-hmm.
provide that. And with all of these questions in terms of the stages, some of these future questions get into, can you reach a stage and then revert back? What I want, if I haven't already sent this message, I want to send it today. Even if a child has gone that deep root into psychological intimacy, emotional intimacy, at some point, it doesn't mean they stay there.
Right.
Our
Right.
defenses are always going in and out. For me, my defenses are coming up and going down. Um, the problem, of course, is when they get locked in and get stuck, when those defenses get stuck that don't allow for us to feel um, love or feel care or these things that are necessary for the dance of attachment, for those roots to be felt. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but what I mean is that for a child with, you know, hypersensitivity, what some of our children who are diagnosed with ADHD and autism are hypersensitive kids with these
Mm-hmm.
open sensory gating systems. They're going to feel it if we help provide this. They're going to be able to feel it sometimes, but it's leaky. It's leaky, um, which basically means that we have to be intentional, just like everything I've already said
Mm-hmm.
around the play, around
Mm-hmm.
seeing that. How do I engage at the senses? How do I engage in the sameness? How do I engage in the coming alongside, the belonging and loyalty, the significance, and everything that we just discussed around play becomes even more important for these kids because their defenses are up around attachment
Mm-hmm.
to compensate for that sensory overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
The play aspect becomes even more important to helping those defenses come down safely. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yes. I'm
Okay.
just trying to think of the best sort of clarifying questions to support moms who find themselves in this situation. I think what I'm hearing is, you when you describe your own interaction with your hypersensitive son
Mhm.
and what it took for you to find something that was going to work,
Yeah.
and what a big part um, was play, right? A big
Mhm.
discovering a playful way to soften his heart. And so
Yes.
I think that might be important to dive into a little bit more too, is helping people
Yeah.
understand how much the defenses are part of this attachment model and
Yeah.
understanding what those look like, when to recognize when somebody is defended. We've talked a lot about the soft heart, but I think this might
Oh,
be
it's huge.
right and a very new way to look at this situation with these neurodiverse kids, these kids with hypersensitivity,
Mhm.
that this is a situation where we're dealing with defenses
Yeah.
essentially,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and
Because
recognizing that, and then coming at it in a way to soften the defenses, that's the goal.
yes. Yes. I that is so beautifully said. And I feel like I want to bookmark it for a future episode because there's
Okay.
so much to say about it.
Okay. Hmm.
Um,
And this
and it
factors into what we were just talking about with the adult children too. you know
100%.
those kids that are asking mom to stay away, that we're dealing with defenses.
Correct.
Okay.
100%. And once you start to, like you're saying, once you start to recognize it, you don't have to take it as personally.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I've been wanting to share this Aesop's fable for multiple episodes, and I just haven't gone there yet. So I'm going to use it now. I have two sons, one of
Hmm.
whom I've realized is highly sensitive. The other
Hmm.
one who is highly sensitive, but also potentially on this hypersensitive spectrum, right? More of this potentially, we've not gotten a diagnosis, but he would land more in that Asperger's area.
Sort of high functioning.
Oh, extremely gifted,
Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
very intelligent, but has some of these aspects.
So, okay, maybe even twice exceptional, I think is what that's called in the gifted world,
Yeah,
potentially.
maybe.
Okay. Okay.
So all of this is to say, once I understood that sensitive children are going to by nature have heightened tendencies towards being defended. So more easily wounded, the sensory overwhelm aspect, especially for our hypersensitive, that the brain is just going to kick in protection to stop the overwhelm, to stop the wounding.
And this comes back to that gating again, right? That sensory gating
Yes.
in the theory of positive disintegration. Like I've heard Jesse say, it's like the aperture on the camera. It just
Interesting.
lets in so
More.
much. Yes, it
Yes.
lets in more. And so it makes sense that they're going to want to defend because it's too intense.
The brain has
This
to.
yes, because the stimuli coming in is too intense.
Yep.
Okay.
And so if we, at just a very basic sense, if we understand um, that the brain is kicking in protection
Hmm.
for a child who's experiencing, whether it's sensory or emotional feeling that is too much to bear,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to bring that protection, that armor down? And
Well,
this,
and it makes me think of that hammock and how important then to
so,
ensure those holes aren't too big.
right. So let's talk about Aesop fable,
Yes.
the sun and the north wind. And I don't know if anyone out there is familiar with this fable, but it's a competition where the sun says, the north wind is like, I see that man down there, he's got a winter coat on. I'm gonna bet you, son, that I can tear that coat, I can get that coat off of him better than you can.
Hmm.
And the son's like, okay, it's on. We're gonna see who can get the man to take off his coat. Well, the north wind comes in and just starts blowing this fierce, cold, bitter wind. Well, what does the man do? He tightens his grip on his coat.
Hmm.
He pulls it tighter. He holds on. Well, eventually the north wind gives up and is like, okay, son, well, your turn. And the sun comes out warm, inviting. The man lays down under a tree and he just sheds his coat. He peels that coat right off because of the warmth
Mm-hmm.
and generosity of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I
exactly
love
like you
that.
said,
Hmm.
right? Like whether it's our adult child who's defended against us away at college, or it's our teenager or our young adult who has, you know, autism, ADHD, who has the brain has kicked in these defenses to protect them from the sensory input that's too much to bear. Either scenario, what we're looking at is not blowing that cold wind because that's going to lock those defenses in harder.
Hmm.
But how do we
Hmm.
provide that warmth of the sun? And it's not a one-time thing. It's not like, okay, I got it today, and now they're going to be fully developed in their 6 stages, and my work is done. No. And when we talk about this work of play, what play does, I think this is one of our biggest challenges as adults, depending how we grew up culturally, is to be
Hmm.
silly,
Hmm.
is to actually
Hmm.
engage in that way. It can be extremely difficult for some of us.
Hmm. Yes, thank you for that. I wanted to make sure that that got set how
Extremely
hard
out
this
of
can
our
be.
comfort
Hmm.
zone.
Hmm.
We're in work mode. That's the adult mode. Performance and outcome. And play is a totally different mode.
Hmm.
And it requires us to also be vulnerable.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it is
And
going to
most of
be
us are defended as well.
100%. But
Hmm.
it is going to be our way in to that warmth.
Yeah. Mm.
And oh, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. It's going to give us the rewards. That's what I meant. Because it's not a one-time thing, because this is lifelong. We don't just get to that 6th stage and we're all set.
Right.
This is a dance. This is walking that maze. This is, but what we actually gain from it as the adults involved, when especially when we engage in that play, we benefit so much.
Yes.
We feel the spark.
We're
We
softening our own defenses.
and we become more attached to our children as well,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
the greatest gift,
Yes.
the
Yes.
greatest delight. So it
And
it it brings its own fruit for us as we
yes.
commit to this.
Mm, I love that and hope that inspires mm, yeah, listeners to give it a shot because I do also know that these dynamics can be well worn, well grooved,
Yeah,
and that it can take a lot of conscious effort to change that dynamic and to have the persistence to keep at it.
yep,
When you're not getting any responsiveness to your efforts, when you are now trying to be playful and that's uncomfortable and unnatural for you, and they're not responding to it, what is going to inspire you to hang in there?
yeah,
And I think what you just said is really important that you benefit too
yep,
across the board, not even just in this relationship, but across the
100%.
board by becoming a more playful, less defended person. Being more
Yep,
open-hearted in the world is going to make your experience of life so much better.
yeah, exactly. Yep, and we can remember the I've talked a lot about silliness today, but there can also be the melancholy play, which is the sad
Hmm.
songs, the if you play an instrument, if you watch a sitcom that makes you cry, these are all ways to tap into that melancholy aspect as well, which
And
is
thank you for
so
calling that
critical.
play, because again, the way we're framing things can be so helpful. And I don't know that a lot of people would think of that as play,
Hmm.
of intentionally choosing something that's going to make you cry.
Yeah. Yep.
That doesn't, I think, feel like play to a lot of people. So
Yeah.
seeing it as that and recognizing the benefit of making that choice
Yep.
towards softening your heart in whatever way you can get there.
Exactly. Exactly. And so this kind of comes back to the second part of this question. When I talk about the play, especially if you have, you know, a hypersensitive adult child, especially if they're more in that kind of high functioning Asperger's area, you're going to know that they have special interests. Okay. That there's these things that they become very obsessed with or fixated on. Maybe gender currently is your child's
Hmm.
special interest. We know. So
Hyper
this can be,
focus. Hmm.
yeah, so this can be um, incredibly challenging, what I'm going to say next. But your way into attachment, to building that hammock with your child, is to come alongside those special interests
Hmm. Hmm.
and ask them about them. Get into them with them. Like, I mean, this is going to sound like so abrasive. If gender is that thing for your child right now, is there a way, you know, to come alongside that in order to get in with them?
You are speaking to a probably the most challenging dynamic that I deal with.
Yeah, yeah,
And that is because this is also mom's hyperfocus. And I
right.
think some of this high sensitivity is coming from the parents. And so if you've got your own hyperfocus on the same thing that they're hyper-focused on, but you are on the opposite side of that, what does that do to the dynamic?
Yeah,
And this one might be too much,
yeah.
you know, um,
So is there something
especially if
else?
damage has been done around it, that
Hmm.
has kind of
Hmm.
affected that psychological intimacy, which is I can speak to, right? Like that
Hmm.
happened in my home.
Hmm.
So I did find other interests. Luckily, my daughter And I think this is often the case. I think it's often the case where this is mom's hyper focus and it's less of a hyper focus for the child.
Mm,
But
wow.
because mom is so hyper focused on it, it's causing that break in attachment, right? It's causing that
Yeah.
attachment to be frayed. And so if mom could pay more attention to other things that the child is interested in,
Yes. Oh
and those
gosh.
can be, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that because if the opportunity is there and you can get out of that what you're calling a hyper focus as the mom, as the parent, and you can see a bigger picture of the things that your child is focused on, has that special interest. You get inside them, right there with them. Talk about it.
It's
With
okay.
it.
So I'm going to jump in
Yeah.
just with some of the things that I learned with this, right?
Yeah.
Because another challenging part of this is we want to seize the teaching moment.
Oh,
And I'm going to caution against that too. That I had to sit through a lot of painful content that my child was into and not any time. And I would build up lots of goodwill here as far as not saying anything. I would go months without trying to seize the learning opportunity. Excuse me. Anytime I did, that's what stuck with her. And that's when she'd storm out of the room. It's like, I can't share anything with you,
yep.
you know, because I tried to use it as a teachable moment. And
Yeah.
she
So
was on
stop.
to me every time, you know. And
Okay,
all
these
that goodwill that I had just built up through months of not saying anything went out the window.
these highly sensitive kids can smell that
Mhm,
coming from a mile away, and boy, does it wound them. It's like a knife
mhm,
through their hearts.
mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
we have to stop. What Neufeld says is you're not there to teach a lesson.
Yeah.
Don't make everything about teaching a lesson. Retreat into relationship. Your whole priority is how do I come alongside this interest?
Mhm,
It's my way into their hearts by
mhm,
sharing it with them, by laughing about it, by asking, by watching it, whatever it is. Like I literally, I got to tell you the story. And I do believe, like I've said, I feel like my son is anyone who's hypersensitive is going to be highly sensitive, but there is kind of delineation with the sensory gating aspect of the hypersensitivity. I do believe my son is on that
mhm,
highly functioning spot. He has created worlds of these,
mhm,
like a whole farm that has cities and states, and then now they all have football teams and basketball teams and baseball teams, and they all have different mascots. And this is his way, I think, of patterning the chaos, right? He has
mhm,
to hold on to
mhm,
something, so he just creates all of these imaginary worlds. Well, you better believe these teams play each other. They have records, they have statistics, and they have tournaments. And when we
mhm.
go on walks in the woods, which are rare right now because we're very busy, he will quiz me. He quizzes me on the teams. Who's in the
Mhm.
top five? Name them. I have to be ready, and I'm not always in my top form, but I need to know the towns. I need to know the names, and I need to be willing to just be quizzed.
Okay, this is getting interesting. And well, it's also I'm thinking about my own kids. And again, I, I, I wonder about this hyper attunement sometimes. You know, my son and my daughter did this too often. When I can't read their mind, they are just like disgusted with me. Like, how do you not know every single interest and like and dislike? And I don't know how healthy that is,
Hmm.
but I find it interesting too that clearly it was there, that they have this
Mhm.
expectation. Like somewhere along the line, they think mom is this magical, that she knows everything about me, but it, I, I question that sometimes, whether that's particularly healthy for them.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
the last
mm,
generation of parents were certainly not that highly attuned. And I've wondered sometimes too if our high attunement has contributed to some of this
mm,
intense sensitivity,
mm,
if that
mhm.
makes sense. That's just
Yeah,
something that
good
has
question.
crossed my mind. And I know we can't go too far down this rabbit hole. We need to get to the rest of the
Yeah,
questions, but maybe this is something that we come back to.
totally. I think for me, it's a matter of this is my son's inner world,
Hmm.
and I am one of the only human beings on the earth who he allows into it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I better be there.
I've written a sentence very similar to that when it
Yeah.
comes to my daughter's, I called it her intellectual overexcitability. That would be the theory of positive disintegration
Mm,
term for that,
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm,
she and I
mm-hmm,
share that. And that I don't know if she's got anybody else in her life that engages with her in the way that I do
mm-hmm.
on that level,
Yeah,
with that particular intensity that she has
yeah,
that I share.
yeah,
So, yeah, yeah,
yep.
interesting.
Very interesting. Well, what would you think about just reading through um, these last questions and maybe kind of just what do you think? Wrapping up with general comments around
Yes, and
the
maybe
ones
even
we haven't
planting another
addressed yet?
seed.
Yeah.
Yes, because there's something that has been on my mind since we started these
Yeah.
conversations that I know we need to get to. Um,
Well, so let's read them all out loud just for the sake of time.
okay.
Um,
Some of them
and
we've probably already provided,
covered.
yes, answers
Yeah.
for. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we don't get to anything, you know, I know that are in enough depth, hopefully we'll come back to it. Or if any of you who are listening who may have submitted these questions feel like, oh, it feels too open-ended for me, I want more,
Hmm.
I'm sure you can reach out
Yes,
and let that be known, and we can come back to those aspects that feel like they were left hanging. So we don't want to leave
certainly.
anyone hanging. No
Hmm.
hammocks here. We want the full, nothing leaky, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so this is the second paragraph of the same person, I believe, who submitted
Hmm.
this, what we've talked about already. So I'll read this. So here I go. Also, is it possible to revert to an earlier stage of attachment in adolescence? It seems that up until age 12 or 13, my child wanted the psychological closeness of stage 6. She wished to be known as indicated by her desire to confide in me. After this point, perhaps due to a shift in peer orientation common in adolescence, or due to her how do you say that word? Nascent,
Nascent? I know, I was
nascent,
realizing
nascent,
that's not a word I use
nascent,
often
yeah,
or ever.
nascent, yeah, trans identification. She shifted away from wanting to be known by me and became secretive, which continues today into young adulthood. Is it even possible for a child, teen, or adult who is trans identified to reach or maintain the sixth step of attachment with parents who are non affirming? It seems that from a trans identified person's perspective, anyone who doesn't affirm their identity doesn't truly know them.
This is the one that I have so many thoughts and so much to say about, but yeah.
Yeah, and I want to tell the mom who submitted this, I have that same question as well. When I think about that stage of being known, I do come back to this of how would a parent achieve their child feeling like they are known while also saying, I'm not going to go along with it. I just, what an impossible task.
Well,
I'm sure it's not impossible, but it seems,
so a question that I posed to my community
hmm
recently, because this has been on my mind, and sort of my
hmm
own, where is my attachment with my daughter as far as the
hmm
psychological intimacy is
hmm
concerned?
hmm hmm
and I've got a few thoughts. Um, First, I'm going to start with, and for listeners, if you want to read my piece, Making Sense, I kind of address this because and I'm curious about Newfeld's ideas on this, how deeply he's explored this. Maybe there's a lot more out there that I don't know about. But from my perspective, we are in a relatively new situation culturally where where families are maladjusted, right? Where kids are growing up in two competing cultures.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's the task of the parent to keep them oriented to us in this world is I, it's so challenging.
It is.
And who's to say? I mean, I know we all think that we're right in this, but depending on where the culture goes, you know what I mean? Like to me, it makes sense that the child is going to have to explore the culture of the mainstream for survival reasons. Now that's philosophical,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
definitely a rabbit hole. And so I don't want to get too deep down that right now, but
Hmm.
something that I
Hmm.
think we makes sense for us to come back to.
Hmm.
But when it comes to the psychological closeness and intimacy, I'm going to again say I'm dealing with some highly attuned families. And I know that that was the case in my family. That when a child tries on an identity that
Hmm.
feels inauthentic or it's a stretch, they can't take that to a highly attuned mom
Mm.
because mom's going to see right through it.
Mm.
That psychological intimacy has almost pushed them. It almost demands that they pull away.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, I don't know that I don't know that it's a negative on the attachment for
Yeah.
that to have happened. I
Right.
think that's why it happened.
Interesting.
Now, then the tricky thing for mom is to not increase the gap. And
Right.
I think that's what has also happened in a lot of these situations is mom
Yeah.
panics. Wait a minute, we were super close and now you're a million miles away and
Yeah.
I'm panicking because this is scary as shit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so then
Yeah.
we exacerbate it. And like I said, we increase the gap.
Yeah.
But I think that captures the dynamic in a lot of these homes.
Yeah.
And she's got a point, right? Like how
Yeah.
then when they've got to maintain that distance because the cognitive dissonance is too much for them,
Yeah.
too much to bear, as you said earlier.
Hmm. 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 Yeah. 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 I feel like I'm like this is a beautiful question. And I just feel like it's an open question.
That we might need to return to.
Yeah.
Maybe just
Yeah.
acknowledging the challenge of this
100%. And
and
just thinking
committing
about,
to talking more. Hmm.
yeah. And
Hmm.
also when I hear I have two different thoughts before we move on. One is, I think, many people who are listening to this are already going to be deep in to
Hmm.
their child telling them I'm trans, that this isn't going to be like, oh, I get to redo that first response or anything like
Right.
that. But when I think about how would I respond, because my sons could still do this. We are nowhere near
Hmm.
the end of my own story with this topic.
Hmm.
Um, so how would I respond to acknowledge that they may feel like they are wanting to be known? That perhaps that is a sincere sense that they have of sharing this with me. Um, it feels like it may not always be that, actually, that it may be more ideological, or that there, I don't know that that's always where this coming out is coming from, I guess, is what I'm saying. That's an open question for me. I do not know. But if that,
You mean
operating
the
on,
wanting to be known? I'm sorry, I just want to
well,
clarify what you mean by
that's a child coming and saying, I've figured out that I'm trans. If I'm a boy, I'm really a girl. I think sometimes it is probably accurate to say that the disclosure of that to a parent indeed is coming from this attachment drive to be known.
hmm
What I'm saying is, I don't think it necessarily always is.
Okay.
I think it could be other dynamics at play that are in the guise of, I want to be authentic. I want to,
Yes.
there's just so
Yes.
many potential factors going on in that scenario.
Oh, yes.
But
Yes.
if we are operating on the assumption, or the belief that our child has come to us with a disclosure that is in search of psychological intimacy by sharing what they know to be true for themselves in that moment, how would one respond to acknowledge, wow, thank
hmm
you
hmm
for sharing
hmm
this. This seems so important to you.
hmm
You're probably very scared. You're probably very, it's got to be very hard to share something so vulnerable.
hmm
I need some time to think and process this.
hmm
I've
hmm
run this scenario through my head. How would I respond to honor that search of psychological intimacy if that is what is driving the disclosure?
hmm hmm
Um, while also holding my ground. What does that look like? So that's just my first meandering of how I've run that scenario through, how I might
hmm
imagine trying to respond,
hmm
while also acknowledging that maybe that's not actually the level that they're, it may or may not be where it's really coming from. I don't know. Um, so that's one piece. And then the second piece is, I think I forgot the second piece already. From your story that you were sharing, where you think this highly attuned relationship between mother and daughter, that in and of itself means the the psychological intimacy has to be rolled back by the daughter because she can't.
Because she's torn between two cultures.
Right. So in that scenario, what I wanted to say is, remind yourselves that the story isn't over yet.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Remind yourselves that the story isn't over yet, that this is a period of time where this psychological intimacy may be rolled back. It's not forever.
Yeah.
Your work is to hold on. Your work is to hold on, providing for those other layers, sameness.
There's
You know,
another complicating factor here too that I'm sorry, I know we
no,
need to
bring it.
wrap up, but
I know, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
it's the again comes back to the mom's hyper focus and the information that she's getting
Yeah.
that is compelling her to shut this down,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to not give it any legitimacy,
Mm,
because to give it any legitimacy, they feel is to concretize it.
mm.
And we're just opening a can of worms right now.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. There's so much.
there's so much, there's so many factors at play here that create this challenging dynamic that is so hard to unpack and restructure, right?
Yeah.
Or reorient to, or just, to remember to come back to play and relationship. And that opens another can of worms where there are some moms willing to just throw away their authenticity, their honesty. They feel like that's necessary to keep the attachment. Like I have to use the pronouns, or I have to capitulate to her demands in order to keep the relationship.
Yeah. Well, Yeah. Oh, there's so much more to be said
I
there.
know so much. I
But
know.
this is, and this kind of comes back around, and then I just want to quickly just address, you know, some of the things we didn't get to here. I think the first part of this question, is it possible to revert to an earlier stage of attachment? Yes, always, at any stage of life,
Hmm.
100%.
And its
Stages,
defense is at play, I would say.
yep,
Right. Okay.
right, yes. And then
Okay.
the stages being uneven, and that you can go back and forth, especially when you're haven't experienced a destabilizing event. There's already a question around that too. Absolutely.
Hmm.
How do neurological differences impact these stages? Um, this question about how a parent can do a lot of relationship work with the child may never develop the capacity to reciprocate to the parent or others. I think and it says, how does the attachment model address this reality? The Dr. Neufeld's model is all about talking about that reality. I just want you to know.
Okay.
And we're going to dive into that more with the more conversations around hypersensitivity, because it is the work of attachment
Hmm.
through the work of play that does um, allow these stages to unfold for a child with hypersensitivity, okay, with neurological differences.
And
Um,
also, just reinforcing what that will demand of the parent, that
yeah, a
that's
lot.
going to, yes. Okay. It's probably
Oh,
not
yeah,
impossible, but it's going to demand
a
much
lot.
from you. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then last but not least, a mother had written in just about how she, through the Stoic Mom Project community, had started to use her daughter's name and female pronoun, and feeling like that was gave her a sense of authenticity and integrity, and like being able to breathe, to exhale.
Mhm.
And that use of the natal pronouns has trickled into conversations with family and friends who are using only the male pronouns. Um, and that is also felt more authentic to her, even though many of those people are not on the same page as her. And then she just asks, as the summer approaches and my daughter comes home from college, I worry that my growing practice of rejecting her preferred new pronouns will spill over into our day-to-day life. Although I feel more authentic with the she, her pronouns, I worry about the hurt this may cause, and by extension, that it may impede connection and attachment. I fear that misgendering my child to her will be very hurtful. We are tenuously attached right now. And she says, I think my heart says to subjugate all my sense of reality, use her preferred pronouns, and prioritize the connection. Any thoughts?
So there it is. There's that question.
Yeah. So yeah, I just thought that rounded it out. Um, and what I wanted to say here, coming back to what we were just talking about, like you said, how do you do both things?
Hmm. Hmm.
It takes me back to this, how this is growing us up, because what we
Yes.
talk about with maturation is the ability to hold two conflicting thoughts, feelings at the same time. So here you are having to both maintain your sense of reality
Hmm.
and integrity while also prioritizing the connection to your daughter.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, you know, if your attachment to her is, oh, go ahead,
I
jump
was
in,
just gonna say
go.
it's exhausting. What you are,
Exhausting.
it's I can completely relate to what you were saying, and I just want moms to know the level of consciousness that it takes to do that is
Yep.
exhausting, and you're doing such a hard thing, and it's possible. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I've thought about this question for weeks because we read these questions before the last episode.
Hmm.
We didn't get to this one yet. I just want whoever wrote this, I want you to know, and each of you, but this question, I just want you to know this has like been in my mental landscape, in my heart, in my mind for weeks as I've driven my children to and from
Hmm.
school. Like that's where I do a lot of my thinking. And so I just
Hmm.
want you to know this question has just been with me. And um the sense that I have tried to crystallize around it, or to hold on to around this, is doing what you can, retreating into relationship a lot of what we've talked about today already. How do you leave those love notes in the morning while she's home from college? Find something she's into that you can share together. Go play tennis, watch a show, whatever, where her bend is, what she enjoys, or you share in common, developing rituals around that while you have her home. The more you can create that sense of warmth, engagement, relationship, and play, it's almost as if you can create enough of that sun, that warmth of that
Mm-hmm.
sun,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then it's almost as if those she, her pronouns slip in somewhere, can that experience be lighter? It's like, oh, oops, you know,
And I'm going to
go ahead.
say
Yeah,
that
go
has
ahead.
worked,
Yeah,
and I appreciate
yeah,
what you're saying. It is about making your container bigger. But I also want to just bring up that alpha component of this
yes, exactly.
and to be careful not to let fear drive your decisions.
That's
Now
right.
you are not being authentic.
100%.
And our kids need that from us. They need our authenticity. It doesn't mean we have to be up in their face with it,
Yeah,
but we need to be true to ourselves or we are destabilized and we are not going to be able to be the alpha in the relationship.
yeah. And it doesn't mean like, okay, your daughter walks to the door, I'm going to call her she, her, and her native. I mean,
Right. It's
that would
not
be
about
terrible.
provoking her.
No.
Right. That's right.
But it is about not giving so much power to the pronouns.
Yes. Yes. And I just want to speak to that. My daughter, it's, and I can't say this is going to happen in everybody's case, but it has worked for me.
Hmm.
She does not have the same attachment to that anymore. She is unfazed when she's misgendered, right?
Yep.
Like it's just not, it doesn't have the power over her that it once did. And she doesn't even expect it from most people, I think.
Hmm.
Just her
Hmm.
grip on it has loosened so much. And it took a lot of conscious effort
Hmm.
to do what
Hmm.
you are saying, but I would say that was the approach that I took and that I encourage with my clients. That's what I help them do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
Yep. So prioritize that relationship. Get in with her on things that she likes. Develop rituals and routines you can do together,
mhm.
and let it slip a few times lightly, and treat it like it's light.
Yes, your energy matters. If you are so um, uptight about it, right, and scared about it, that gets telegraphed too, and that
100%.
that feeds the contention, that feeds it, and she's more likely to be offended by it if you're so fearful around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So to be continued, but this has
yes.
been awesome. I hope those of you listening who submitted these questions, I again want to say um, just a heartfelt gratitude because they have provided such rich terrain for conversation and reflection. And
And they
thank
make it
you.
practical, right? They make it
Yes.
practical because we can talk through what this looks like in real life and give people real tools
Yep.
and things to look for. So
Yep.
it's so helpful. Okay. We'll be back soon.
We'll be back soon. Take care, everyone. Soak in the warmth of that sun. All right.
Hang in there, mama.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. We hope you take something of value from our conversation today. Please check out the show notes for additional resources, including a prompt for reflection. We welcome your feedback in the comments and hope you join us for the next episode of Attachment Matters.